but yet society is telling me I am something that I don't believe that I am, I guess the same dynamic would occur. That I'm always fighting against something, and therefore it makes that idea of how I think of myself or what I'm fighting to be, it just gives it more life.
That's real.
So I think that might be a lot of the chatter that we're seeing a lot right now around gender, around sexuality, and the alphabet that they say. So all of that, that might be contributing to some of that you're looking at people who are just fighting to be.
Peace. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, family, to Tea Time Podcast by Atia J. This is your self-help, spiritual podcast, uplifting topics we all love to avoid, but we definitely need to conquer. Tea time is your moment to pause, listen, and absorb what is soothing to you. I'm Atia J, aka Tia, a certified holistic life coach, and this idea was sparked by my passion to help others discover their latent potential, purpose, and significance, especially if you are one who feels overlooked, alone, or forgotten. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. I see you and I feel you. Welcome to Tea Time Podcast. Enjoy the tea. Peace. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome everybody to another episode of Tea Time Podcast. It's your girl Tia, back with another episode of the podcast. We are closing out the podcast, and I want to invite my final guest for the season on. I had to bring my own mother back, Dr. Monique Swift, Muhammad Moski.
And I'm the big kid. You don't know nothing about that.
No, I don't. And something that came to mind, and it's something that I see prevalent in our society, and especially in the millennial generation, that I don't necessarily think is healthy, and that is sexuality is not identity. That is my topic for today, and I wanted to discuss it with my mom because of her background in psychology, being a private practicing psychologist, as well as my interest being a life coach, but as well as just being an educator and someone who wants to see people living their most fulfilled life as their fulfilled selves. So to me, and in my mind, sexuality and identity are two different things. They're very separate. They don't have anything to do with one another. And I wanted to engage in a conversation just discussing perhaps why, seeing what my mom's thoughts about it are, because I believe her thoughts may be a little different with her background. And yeah, it just might be a cool talk to have. So let's get into it. Ma, do you want to introduce anything about yourself first?
I am, in addition to being your mother, I am a wife, I am a mother, I am a family member, but professionally speaking, I'm also a psychologist. I have a clinical private practice. And most of my work, a lot of my work is consulting work in the area of trauma and racial trauma and trauma-informed practice. So that's in a nutshell.
Getting into the topic, I wanted to begin with a story. When thinking about this topic, I thought of a time when I was teaching high school. I had a freshman student who had found me on social media, so of course this student followed me. And while I was exploring the student's profile, I saw in the description that the student identified as pansexual. Back in the day, I had never heard of that. When I spoke with the student who found me on Instagram, we discussed it and everything, and I said, yeah, I saw your profile. And I asked the student about what is pansexual. What does that mean? I have never heard of it. What does it mean? The student explained that pansexual is essentially someone who likes human beings. Doesn't matter your sexual preference, doesn't matter your gender, identity, doesn't matter what or where you're from. This person just likes human beings. And I said, aren't you in a relationship? And the student was in a relationship. And I like just asked, what made you want to identify as being pansexual? And the student said that they think it's wrong for them to like discriminate, essentially. It's wrong for them to not like somebody just because of who they are, what they may identify as. And I was still confused, very confused. And I asked for more clarity. And the student essentially said they're open to being attracted to many different types of people. And I said, okay, well, why is that in your bio? Why is that such an important part to put forward as yourself? And the student essentially answered, good question. And that, to me, is where this idea that I had about sexuality and identity being two separate things, where it stems from. Not that story and that experience of mine has stayed in my mind. It kind of just popped up when I had this thought. But to me, sexuality and identity are not the same. I think that they don't morph together at all, in honesty and in my opinion. I think to put them together creates confusion. I think it creates confusion, and I think it also may conflate and confuse people about who they are, who they what their value is, which is most important and my biggest concern about the health in this, mental health wise. Because if we're conflating identity and sexuality, I think a lot of times that value can get mixed up in that. And because your sexuality may not play out a certain way, or because you may not be unsure about your sexuality, you then begin to question your identity. You then begin to question your value in this world as a human being, as a person.
Was that particular student trying to convey ideas about her identity? Or was she or he trying to convey ideas about sexuality?
So this was in the Instagram bio. So this is your identity, like who you are. This is what you want people to know about you before they follow you if you're a private profile. So I would say identity. That was a student saying pansexual is my identity.
So liking all human beings. I could like all human beings. It has nothing to do with sexuality.
That was my question about it.
But to say I like all human beings, okay, is one thing. But to say I think it's wrong, of course they think that, but I think it's wrong to not like all human beings. I struggle with that.
That's why I would say that I question. I didn't do it in a way attacking the student's beliefs, but I questioned simply because I knew the student was into social justice at the time. And social justice
but
in
that's what it sounds
the
like.
new age. Exactly. So I understood that part of what the student enjoyed to do and how the student enjoyed their time. But to me, that was a conflation of two different ideas. Just because you have this heart for all human beings, which I can relate to, that doesn't mean sexually that is your preference. And mind you, the student was a freshman student, so I was even asking, what do you know about sex at that point? What have you gotten into about sex that makes you want to say, yeah, I'm about all human beings when it comes to sex? Because in my understanding of sexuality, that is about who you like to have sex with. It's not even about who you want to be in a relationship with. So for a freshman student who's 13, 14 to state that I'm pansexual, to me that's what have you experienced to where you know that that's the case, you know, and my thinking back then as a teacher, and still in my thinking right now. But what are your ideas, or I guess experiences, with identity and sexuality?
So I would like to frame those two concepts first, like define them. Can you define them?
Yes. So I looked up the definition, and Merriam-Webster defines identity as the distinguishing character or personality of an individual. The relation established by psychological identification. And another definition is also the condition of being the same with something described or asserted. And the definition of sexuality is the quality or state of being sexual, the condition of having sex, sexual activity, expression of sexual receptivity or interest, especially when excessive. Those are Merriam-Webster definitions.
I want to add another concept to this conversation, and that's the concept of self. So I did look up self in juxtaposing it to identity. I got something a little different out of identity when I did that. That identity is more used to refer to one's social face. So how you are portraying yourself socially, how you're being perceived socially.
Okay.
Whereas self is generally used to refer to one's sense of who I am, what I am.
Oh, that's different.
So that's more, right, that's quite different. That's more of an internal process, the idea of self. The idea of identity it incorporates an external, an external element. So now with that's kind of how I'm going to be approaching how I see identity from that frame.
Okay, I just want to highlight that because I believe that I was understanding identity in the idea of self. So identity to me has always been this first part of the definition about distinguishing character or personality. So to me, that's all about yourself. To me, your identity is about you. It shouldn't be based on who you're dating. It shouldn't be based on who you're married to, if you're a mother or not. Your identity is about you and how you feel, in my perspective. But your definition that fits that is self. And identity and what the framework that you understand has more to do with what you relate to outside of you, which was another definition that I found of identity, which is the condition of being the same with something described or asserted. So like, I would say like I identify with that, how we can say I identify with the ideas of sexual identity or something. So
to me, I feel the definition that I just gave kind of fits this conversation, but I totally jive with this other way. That's how I generally think of identity. But I think it's the both and here. Like one can refer to identity because at its root, identity comes from the Latin word edicare, I believe is edicare. But what it means is to make the same as. So if you look at it from its root, identity is about making something the same as, and in this instance, the same as me. So if I identify with, I don't know, being a psychologist, right? I'm making that the same as me. But
get your grandchild real quick. Okay, yeah, good save, because you're about to get beat.
That doesn't mean that I am, I am a psychologist. Journey. Like is that who I am by nature? No, this is what I do professionally. So when we identify though, sexuality, same thing. I identify as a heterosexual person or a homosexual person. I'm making that's the who that I am, but is that really who I am? But I think both of these kind of going to weave into this conversation in some elements, because I think when it comes down to it, you have to ask the question in this conversation is, who am I? Or what am I? In my essence, what or who am I? And so in some people would say I'm a spirit being. And so, well, I'm going on, let me pause because I have I was about to go into another area.
I think you make great points. I think that's what I want to emphasize with this conversation too, my ideas that identity is not sexuality come from the fact that I think that it is unhealthy to put who you enjoy having sex with, or how you enjoy having sex, or whether or not you've had sex or want to. I think that's unhealthy to put that up with your identity and who that makes you. Why? You know what I mean? For example, virginity, right? Virginity is something that I learned about differently in the mosque than what I learned about in my social circles while I went to school, and then what I learned about here at home. There were different ways that I learned about virginity. However, growing up, I don't think I took it on as a personal trait of mine, you know?
Right.
However, some people took that as a personal trait of, you know, I'm able to have sexual partners. I haven't had sexual partners and I need to in order to feel like an adult or feel like I'm actually 18. Or, you know, there were some people who I noticed took on, especially going into college. There's somebody specifically I had conversations with who was also a virgin when we started school, and she made sure that stopped, you know, because she wanted her identity. She felt that it was a part of her identity, bless you, and in order to be an adult, you know, she had to get over that hump, essentially. So for me, I always kind of, I don't know why, I've had this kind of separateness of, I know who I am. What I choose to do in my sexual life has nothing to do with who I am. I don't know why I've always had that.
So,
but I believe self is higher than sex.
Okay. But what if that is how I identify? Like, what if that is the totality of who and how I see myself?
I think that can be unhealthy.
Okay.
I think, but
in that sense, it's an identity nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
For that person.
True. Yeah, I can say that, but I think that's an unhealthy way. Like, you can say
unhealthy because
I think it's unhealthy because sex, in my understanding, is an urge. It's a tool for procreation. So if we are identifying with our urges and with lust, and if we're identifying with something that's supposed to be useful for us, but we make ourselves a tool of it, then it's kind of like a lack of control of the self. We're putting sex above ourselves and essentially putting other people above ourselves. Because sex, unless you're asexual and you identify as asexual, sex is something that happens with other people. So if I identify by the way I'm having sex, and they kind of have a sense of control of it, if that's your entire identity wrapped up in it, you know? So, even if you're with one person, you have one partner, one sexual partner, if something goes different with that sex life that you have with that partner, that somehow is affecting your self-worth. That's, to me, that it can be very unhealthy, and I think I think that's the way a lot of people live nowadays, and they don't even realize it, and I think it causes a lot of depression and just a misunderstanding of one's self-worth.
Okay, so I think you make an extraordinarily good point in recognizing where sex is placed, or I think in a natural order. I think we exceed where we could or should be in a natural balance. If we're in natural balance with ourselves, with nature, with the world around us, sex is not central. It's a relevant part, I guess, right, of humanity, but it's not central. And nor is it, I think I can say, part of a social, I mean, if you boils right down to it, sex is about procreation. I know there are many people who will probably see it differently, but it's about procreation. It's essential for procreation, right? Without sex and procreation, the human race just kind of comes to an end. So I guess where I'm going with this is to say that when we begin to center sex in our lives in a way that is disordered, right? Disordered means out of the order of which it was originally intended to be. We become, we become, I guess, out of sync. I feel like society is definitely disordered when it comes to sex, and so we are now beginning to distill our identities down to who we lay in bed with, who we want to lay in bed with, who we prefer to lay in bed with. And I agree with you that that's just kind of, unhealthy in many ways.
Yeah, when you were saying that, it made me think of just music because I love music, but every single song that I listen to, especially nowadays, not every single song that I listen to, I try to make my music taste diverse, but most songs are about sex. Even the songs I grew up on that are, appropriate songs, when I grow up, I listen to the lyrics and I'm like, oh, they talking about sex, just in a cute way. But I think a lot of times entertainment, it seems that all popular music is about sex. It's about getting the relationship. It's about having sex. It's about how you have sex, how many people you can have sex with, how that makes you richer or how that makes you poorer if you don't have it. It is all surrounding in the entertainment, even in movies, even in TV. Everything is about a relationship. Books, everything is about a relationship. Everything is about sex. So when thinking about this topic, I think that's what really got me, is because, especially as children, we're being raised on this entertainment that is all about sex. So, of course, we think life is all about sex. And sex is a wonderful thing. Absolutely. However, I think the society that we live in, like how you said, is it wasn't the word unbalanced, but you said disordered, how society disorders the importance of certain things. It gets us confused, especially growing up, about certain things, and especially about our identity when it comes to sex, to where sex is now in control of us, which, you hear a lot. I was just listening to Usher's song Bad Habit. I love, I just got these bad habits, where he talks about, I think I found the one, but another one come. And it's, this is, Usher's a grown man, growner than me, almost your age. And he, can't even control himself when he says he's in love with someone. So it's like in the fabric of society that we conflate identity and sexuality. And I notice it as a problem, but I don't even know how I don't think other people think of it in that way. I don't even think people think about what they do when it comes to their sex life, no matter what stage they're in, single, married, relationship or not.
I think that's true. But I think we're so externalized in so many ways.
Chris Brown, I remember listening to one interview of him, and he's in this interview laughing, happy, and he's talking about how he lost his virginity at 8. First of all, I'm like, okay, at 8? And he continues the story. He says, yeah, I lost it to my babysitter who was 14. Now, if you know Chris Brown and who he is a sex icon in the eyes of a lot of people. And he's still making music about having sex at his age that he is now. And I don't know his personal life, but I'd wonder if he even knows that he was raped as a child. Because that's what that was.
Yeah.
That's what that was. And he, was prideful and happy about this reality that he had lost his virginity at 8, when that's an issue. That even makes me think of like an R. Kelly. Somebody who his sexual demons and monsters that he never settled with his, sister or cousin, who was sexually assaulting him while he was younger. That he never had that healed, so that manifested in the horrors and stuff that he has done to women, and what he was involved in and allowed to let flourish in the music industry. So it's that, I don't know, this thing with allowing sex to rule who we are, it really bothers me, and I just see it as very unhealthy. And I don't think people attribute issues like that to how we're actually thinking about sex.
Well, yeah, another kernel in that thing that you just laid out is this idea of toxic masculinity and how we think about, men have to be a certain way. And so what we end up doing is, like you gave a perfect example, something of a young boy being raped by his babysitter actually becomes, now we contort it because a man has to, it is always okay with having sex. A man is always like, that's always like a thumbs up, a good thing, and then so because of those toxic ways of thinking about manhood or malehood even, we contort something that is rape into like, a notch on your belt, something positive, or we suppress it, hide it, bury it because, men, you're supposed to either be okay with sex. If it was traumatic, that's not something we talk about. We don't deal with that. So we kind of bury that, hide that away. And so I think that's another kind of kernel in this whole mess of ideas that we're talking about here too.
I think that's a great point. Toxic masculinity, I think a lot of it has to do with men trying to fit the standard of what they're told a man should be by men who are unhealthy, or women who have been hurt by a man who was unhealthy. So there's a lot of issues, I think, with masculinity, and I would say femininity, because on the flip side, keeping it in the pop culture, I think of a woman like Meg the Stallion, who's supposed to be the epitome of a woman to this generation. And she's the epitome of a woman because she's educated, she's well-spoken, but she can also twerk. She has a huge butt. She also is attractive to many men. And that is a part of her that makes her so great in the eyes of this society and makes her great in the eyes of this generation. And I think that's, to me, your sex life, what you're able to do in bed is private. I think it's completely private. No matter how you identify, I think that's something that you should let people know if you want to. And it is something that you need to have a conversation about if you want to. I think that we throw it out there as if you need to wear it as a badge of honor. What you do in bed, who you sleep with, how you make babies or don't make babies, And I think that causes a lot of conflict. I think that causes a lot of fakeness too, because that's things that people need to live up to. If I'm looking at a Meg the Stallion, I'm a young girl in today's society, I want to be like Meg the Stallion. She probably gets all the men. I'm sure Meg the Stallion does not sleep with as many people as is portrayed in her image. Same with Nicki Minaj, who's now, she had that image of Meg the Stallion, and she's now a married woman with children. Similar to Kim Kardashian, who's a married divorced woman with children. But it's kind of like we see one thing, and that thing makes that person famous because the society feeds off of that. But now we want to live up to it, and we put our value into what we see is valuable to these other people, when that's just fake anyway.
But it feeds an appetite. You're making me think. It feeds all these people, all these, I think the reason why these things become popular is because it feeds an appetite. And
True.
It feeds an appetite, and when we put it out there like that, now it becomes okay for me to be chasing that thing that just being in a space of trying to fulfill that like lower desire, I'm going to refer to it as. So I feel like society has inched, over decades, has kind of inched away from, holding itself to any degree of moral compass. Now it's just kind of like, if the desire is to have sex with animals, well, we kind of create a space for that to be okay, and for laws to support it and so forth, because it feeds a low desire, and it's almost like we're in a society that tries to justify and validate every low desire that we have. It becomes okay. It becomes like a right, if you will. Yeah. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
I understand. It's
I'm going off topic a little, but
yeah, but I can understand our low, because I think there is a part of who we are as human beings that need sex. Even with dopamine, how dopamine works, we need sex. Of course, it's something. It's a stress reliever. Yeah, a stress reliever is. It can save you, make you healthier. I've heard in some studies.
It connects you to your spouse, hopefully.
Connects you exactly, or connected to a lot of people sometimes. But it's yeah, but it's definitely something that is necessary and good. I'm not saying that sex is a bad thing at all by any means. Clearly, with the child that I have in my lap, but sex is not a bad thing, and it is something that is, God made us want to have sex for a reason, because we're inclined to want to be with one another. This actually makes me want to read a part from the study guide. I've shown everybody the study guide before. Self-improvement is the basis for community development. And in study guide number 4, there's a part of the analysis that I was reading that speaks to this for me. And it speaks to what I think you were saying as well about things that are disordered. So in this, this study guide is speaking about the struggle for balance and the balance in life. So in this part I highlighted, it says, it is because our inclination towards other human beings is not a primary inclination, it is secondary. We cannot find fulfillment in any secondary need if we ignore the primary need. Our primary need is for Allah, God. And this speaks completely to what I'm trying to say with this point. Like, your identity is not your sexuality. And I think it's with what we were saying about things being disordered. It's what we were saying about the self has to come first. And in my belief, the way that we seek God and the way that we know God, and however you understand him, is through yourself. So if I'm putting God as primary, I'm putting myself as primary as well. I'm not putting sex or my relationship as first or above me or who I am or the fulfillment of my life's purpose.
So that takes me somewhere else that I was thinking of earlier, because you're in this piece in the study guide is talking about our primary need being is for Allah, God, which tells me something about the way how we were created, that we were created to move toward, to seek, to be in line with Allah, God, or however you call God, and that the other things in life are secondary to that. The minister said, nature cannot be changed or altered. It's who you are, right? He says they can change the physical anatomy, but what makes you, right, the essence of you, they cannot deal with that. And to me, that speaks to the fact that, this is something that goes beyond titles, right? Beyond how you choose to be identified, how you choose to be called, or it goes beyond all of that. And it begs the question, what is my nature? What is my nature? Because that's something, your nature cannot be altered. If you were created, if I create a table, right? The nature of that table is to be utilized to put things on, to eat on, whatever it might be. Now, I can sit on the table, but that doesn't make the table a chair. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The nature of this thing was to be a table. And so I guess what I'm saying is that when we look at our nature, what is our nature? When we begin to think about nature, now our ideas of self, our ideas of identity, that grounds those ideas in my thinking. It really grounds them. So if we understand, and others again may differ, but if we understand that we are really spirit beings, right? That we're spirit beings, as many would say, spirit beings on a human journey. If you see yourself from that vantage point, a whole lot of other things it comes in a different order. I can even compare this to being Black, which is an identity that I put out front, that I carry. A lot of who I am is distilled down to me being Black. I'm Black. But at a certain point in my life recently, I realized that my identity goes way beyond just being Black. It is because of society that I've had to identify myself and hold that space of me being Black, because I'm always in opposition to society about that. And so because of that, that has become more pronounced for me, but it's not who I am. It's kind of who the nature of me. There can be an argument for saying the nature is Black, but just from this perspective, I am way beyond just being a Black woman. I'm a spirit being. And so if I'm looking, or if I'm standing in that, the universe, I don't know, opens up differently for me. And that's what I'm experiencing when it comes to Blackness. But when it comes to this other element of, identity, whether it be based on sexuality, whether it be based on socioeconomic status, whether it be based on profession, whatever it might be based on, however you're putting it out there, it's really secondary. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was pretty deep. That made me, think of how I identify as well with my Blackness. I can't say I'm at your level. To me, me being Black is still very tight to me, especially now. But it sounds like what you explained sounds like a journey. So that makes me ask the question, is sexuality being a primary inclination for us, is that a part of the journey? Is that something that we each have to go through?
In the same way as this idea of Blackness?
Or a similar way?
Well, I suppose, given what I'm saying, why my Blackness is so pronounced as a part of my identity, I would imagine for people who feel that I was born in a woman's body, but I'm really a man, but yet society is telling me I am something that I don't believe that I am, I guess the same dynamic would occur. That I'm always fighting against something, and therefore it makes that idea of how I think of myself or what I'm fighting to be, it just gives it more life.
That's real.
So I think that might be a lot of the chatter that we're seeing a lot right now around gender, around sexuality, and the alphabet, that they say. So all of that, that might be contributing to some of that you're looking at people who are just fighting to be what, to have an element of who they are, an aspect of who they are. Not that that is the totality of who they are, but an aspect of who they are honored.
You know what you made me think of? Back in college, in my blackness, I was Black Lives Matter. I shut down Route 18, which is a huge highway around New Brunswick when I was at Rutgers University, and almost got arrested for doing that. I look back on that now and I'm like, that's not the way to go for the fight. That's not how I would do this. But I'm in a different space. I'm in a different understanding of the world. And I'm glad I did what I did back in the day, because that was my understanding at the moment and I did something about it. So hearing you say that about LGBTQ and the fight to just be, right? Because as a Black person, I can relate to that, and just the fight to just be. Let me be. Let me live. And I think that's so critical and important, because perhaps in that journey, that's a struggle that I don't have, an LGBTQ struggle in my sexual preference and identity. Sexual identity is a term I kind of wanted to touch on too. But that's not a struggle that I have in my sexual identity. However, I could understand that when you're in a society where you were just able to be married just a few years ago, being yourself and who you are, how that can be a something that comes to the forefront of who you are. And especially in the time when it's time to fight, because this is socially a huge fight that you're trying to win, and you're trying to have the right to just be who you are, who you feel that you should be able to be.
So the flip side of that is, if the fight wasn't there, would it be as pronounced? Now, I'm leaning on and asking that question. I have not researched this, or this is not something that I've looked into, but certainly I've heard from, in fact, even today, from people who have done this research and looked into how, just going back into ancient African, the origin of time, right? Ancient African culture or ways of living, that there was homosexuality that existed, but it wasn't necessarily identified as homosexuality. It was more in the identity of, from a Native American perspective, this someone being two-spirited, having a spirit of the feminine spirit and embodying the masculine spirit, yet at the same time, and being able to manifest both of these, this both and. And so it was understood in that way, it was honored and revered in that way, and therefore it was never this like pushback, there was never this tension around it. It was just part of the spirit of how people evolve and develop. And so I don't know, I know, this idea of homosexuality as it is today seems very adverse to kind of an African way of being. And I'm wondering if it's because it's become so contorted about sex and kind of come away from this a spirit nature thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I can see it's in what you're saying. I think my idea is, I think society as a whole, not just the LGBTQ community, is wrapped up in sex. That's, everyone is wrapped up in sex. It's like your entire being is either worth more or less because of what you're having sex with and how you're having sex. And like what you just explained, how the Native American and the ancient African way was, that's more about identity in the way that was explained in my understanding, because it's about the individual characteristic, something that is distinguished of that person. It's more about the self and the spirit being and how that person is. To me, that's something that is like, what's the word? To me, that's something that is, you can't, like, it's not up for debate. You know what I mean? Like, if everyone held themselves like that today, in my perspective, there would be no debate. Of course, there might be the political fight to be able to get married, but there would be no debate there would be no confusion or fight about your sex and how you're having sex. There would be none, because it's your personal thing. And I've seen people handle, I feel like I handled myself like that. There's no
like what,
like who I'm having sex with or what I'm doing in my sexual life is not up for debate. It's not a public opinion. It's my journey, my exploration. There's something I still haven't even talked about, but it's something that is dear to me, and it had everything to do with where I was with myself in the moment. I was on that journey, and I'm still on the journey in a different way now. And I think that's something that people could take more kind of control of, I guess. Take more control of their sexual being. And it would be a lot healthier no matter what your sexual identity or preference or gender identity may be. But I feel like we kind of give it up to society, and we get confused and depressed, and our self-worth and our self-value is put into question because we're allowing other people to be the judge and jury on what we do. Even when it comes to, and of course that's a difficult thing, but when it comes to parents and parents judging you on what you've done with your sex life, I think, there's a different level depending on when that conversation engages. If you're 14, that's a different conversation from when you're 18. However, the way that your parents judge you can even set you on the course of how you allow others into your sex life and what that does to you and your self-worth and value.
So what I'm hearing you say is that if this idea, this sexuality element was more of I don't know, private or that's just it, like, I don't know, my height perhaps, like I don't go around you have to accept me as a short person, or I don't have to, it just happens. That's how I was born, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not up for argument, like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that's I need you to accept or not to accept. It's just kind of how I was formed. Similarly, that perhaps sexuality or attractionality is the new word I'm learning, and or whatever it might be, this sex-based identity that people are talking about, that if it were just kind of held in that space, that it's just kind of how I am, there wouldn't be so much tension around it and so much need to fight for it, I think, maybe.
Yeah, I that's how I picture it. For me, I respect, and I know that's not how everyone is received, but for me, I respect people. And I think that when you put
you're pansexual.
Huh? No, I'm not. But I accept all human beings, and I love all human beings for who they are. Good human beings. There's that whole thing too. I don't love everybody. But I think there is an aspect when you can take control, you can have your privacy with it. Like, people aren't going to care. But when you present, it's like a bully, right? Bully people who they know they can take advantage of. That's it. They sense that because that person is like unsure of themselves. That person has a low sense of self-worth, and people pick up on that. So if I take my sexual preference and identity and how I hold myself sexually, and I'm unsure of it, and I'm putting it out there because that's how you're supposed to do in society, that is attracting a whole bunch of bullies, political bullies when you're an adult. It's attracting an entire array of bullies. They can be familial bullies from family that would be quiet if you held yourself strong and confident about who you are, So I think that is a strong factor too, but I don't know if that's talked about with people, about just being confident in yourself. It's not about who it's not a so for me as well, my it hasn't even been focused on sex for me. But when I was thinking about a partner, when I was thinking about getting married, for me, it was always about who am I, what am I doing in the world right now, what am I experiencing in the world, what do I want from a partner, and am I attracting that? Is that person that I'm talking to, dating, courting, is that person who it is that I see myself with? Because I know myself. I know what I want. I know where my future is. And I know what type of partner would help me to get there. So it was never for me about, oh yeah, they sexy. It was never for me about, I mean, that's attractiveness is definitely a part of it, because you see my husband. But it's never been about how that person looks, or if I'm able to bag that person who looks good, how that's going to make me feel. That's going to make me feel good. Not to, I have had experiences like that, but I was in a different state. I was in a low vibrational state. I was in a state where I wasn't thinking in my primary self. And I can reflect and identify that. But I knew that when it came to me choosing a partner, I needed to be good with myself, because I'm not going to attract a good partner if I'm not good with myself. And I feel like a lot of that is missing in today's society, especially when you're equating your sexuality with your identity. Because self, or with yourself. Because self is not sexuality.
The only thing I would like that you would have added to that idea of, how you would look for someone, who you would look for, why, all of that is the collective. Everything that you said was predicated upon the I. And
what do you mean?
I'm coming into a phase, I guess, of my life where I'm so appreciative and respectful of the meaningfulness of the collective, meaning the we. That could be your family, but your tribe, who you're around, who's in your circle. So one should be, I'm now recognizing, be thinking about all of those things you said in terms of selecting a mate or partnering with someone, in addition to thinking about how does this person fit into my tribe? Like, what do they add? How I want to select somebody that's going to add to my tribe, that's going to fill my tribe out in a way that is needed. I think that's another, I would have never thought that way when I was your age either.
I think that's kind of impossible at my age. We don't have a tribe yet.
Well, your family is your tribe. I'm your tribe.
Not that you're not my tribe, but thinking back, I think that idea of tribe and village honestly came with children. I think that came when Journey was around, and seeing how you interact with her. For
you or for anyone?
I would say for me, but I would say typically, just speaking for people my age who have not been married yet and who don't have children, back in the day me, I don't think we think like that. Well, and I don't think if you told me that then, it would connect with me.
I don't know. Because I don't know. One thing that I heard in what you said was something I've taught you all from when you were very young, which you probably don't remember, and that is...
You say this every podcast.
You don't remember a lot of things. I can't help that. But nonetheless, I've taught you when you were young, since you were young, about selecting a mate and the importance of that person being a complement to who you are.
Equally yoked.
No, not just equally yoked, but a complement, meaning in those areas where you are strong or where you're weak, that you want somebody who's going to be strong. Like that's their strength. I remember that. Okay, you do remember that. And you are strong in areas perhaps where they're weak. And so that you all basically, you create a 360 now. There's wholeness in the unity. And so that's a concept that many people don't grow with that, but I heard that in what you said, and I feel like it has to do with how you were reared. Now imagine if I was astute enough at that point to be able to say that, help you to understand that you are part of a union of people, and that union of people has dimension, and some dimensions are stronger than other dimensions, and that you have to think, or should be thinking about, what dimensions need to be filled out here, and how do I connect with someone in a way that actually completes and fulfills this dimension of this union of people. Do you understand?
I think that's asking a lot of someone who's never been married.
Maybe. I think we're off topic.
Yeah. But, no, it's definitely, that could be another whole podcast, but I understand what you're saying, but I have to disagree that I would be receptive to that or even thinking of that, but perhaps if I was raised with it, that would be something instilled in me. But I know that as a conversation, because even now with you saying it, I'm not going to select my partner based on the tribe or what the family needs just in me right now, as I know I was before getting married.
I understand your point
it's
too,
more important
that you're not even
I
thinking
know
in
myself.
terms of tribe when you don't have children, yet now you are. So I get that too.
Yeah.
But again, I do think that if you're reared with this conversation building around you, it'll soak in.
Yeah. I think that has to do a lot with legacy. Like, I think even perhaps for me right now, perhaps that wouldn't be something I rear Journey with, but perhaps that's something that she could rear her children with, because hopefully me and Matt will be able to leave something to her that she would further down the road. I think that definitely has something to do with legacy, because we look at these multi-generational rich families, they had to think like that. They know that, our family deals with the popcorn factory.
That's very true.
I'm going to have to get someone who can fall in line with that, because we have a direct understanding of what it is that we're adding to.
It was something I think Majid said that was talking about the Rockefellers. Mm-hmm. And they were saying how they only married each other, which is a little weird.
Yeah, but I think I've heard that.
Right, it was something recently he said, and they were talking about how they kept it in the family. Mm-hmm. They kept it tight. But that's the type of thing that I'm talking about. Not necessarily marrying your cousin.
Not that.
But what I'm saying is having the sensibility to recognize that you are part of a whole. That it's not about what I want and what's going to make me, what's going to further me, what's going to be me, I, me, I, me.
Facts.
But it's about the we. That I exist because of a we. And that I have to further the we for my I to be relevant. That is, I'm only relevant in the context of the we.
More African perspective.
That is African perspective. If you grew with that, it would be second nature for you to think like that, I think.
I think in a certain context. I think if I raised Journey like that now, she would definitely, the way her personality is budding.
We'll get to raising.
I'm not necessarily in agreement with that as well. Just with me right now. But I can see where it can be positive.
And that we'll see 10 years, 20 years from now.
Will.
All right.
I'll be fighting with Journey.
When Journey
Journey, he doesn't really fit with us. He doesn't really work for us. You have to think about us, not you.
But going back to, you were saying something before, back on the point.
Yeah.
You were saying something before about, now I lost it, but something that you were saying reminded me of a movie that I recently saw. I can't remember the movie. But I recently saw something. I should remember, because I rarely watch anything. But anyway, in this particular movie, there was a gay guy who, the mom was visiting with her son, and her son was gay. But she said something in the movie about he never came out to me. And that was a conversation that she brought up with him over dinner, with him and his boyfriend and some other people. And he made the statement that, like, why do I have to come out? That, like, heterosexual people don't say at some point, okay, I'm heterosexual.
Mm-hmm.
This is who I am, right? So why do I have to come out?
Mm-hmm.
Why does it, right? And so I think it was going to a point that you were making about it, that piece of sexuality being a matter of fact thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a matter of fact of my life, and it's not who I am. I don't need to build my identity around that. And I just thought that was like, yeah, I felt that when he was saying, like, why do I have to, heterosexual people don't come out. I get that.
Yeah. No, that's a key point. That is key. I think that would save a lot of fights, because it's, why do you need to come out to someone? You are who you are. Your preference is what your preference is. Live it. Live it.
You don't owe that really to anyone.
No one
can really should be able to demand that of you.
Mm-hmm. And I think society misconstruing who yourself is, who you are, and your sexual, which, they created the term sexual identity. Your sexual identity, which I think is more of the sameness, what you identify with in terms of what you like, of who you like to have sex with. I think that's more of what that's describing, rather, this is who I am because this is who I have sex with. But we get it confused and conflated. But I think if everyone kept that private and kept it on a need to know basis, not that you're hiding it, but you keep it on I don't need to discuss it. It's not up for debate. It's not up for discussion. It's not up for, you to judge and jury. This is just what it is. This is who I bring home for dinner. If you have an issue with it, that's a conversation that we can have, and we'll decide what to do with it based on our private conversation. But it's not going to be a topic of dinner, For the mother in that movie to even bring it up at a dinner table, that's disrespectful. Why? You don't, that's like you saying, Tia, when exactly did you have sex to have journey? At a dinner table at a family event. That doesn't make any sense. That's just how I view it. But I think that things get very conflated just in the way that we proceed with sex in society today. It makes me think of, I always say this too, and I think I've said it on the podcast before, but I was a tomboy growing up. You know that. Crazy tomboy. You've asked me if I were gay. In high school, I think you asked me if I were gay. I was a crazy tomboy. I remember playing football down the street with the other boys when I was young, and somebody said, yo, that guy is great playing football. And somebody who knew me said, that's a girl that's in back in Maryland, in Chesapeake Beach. I remember hearing that. And, for me, I think it bothered me a little bit, but that's just, these are the clothes I wear. I enjoy playing sports. I enjoy playing basketball. I enjoy that I can beat boys in it. And I enjoy this athleticism that I have. And I don't really have a fashionable style because I'm not focused still. I'm not very focused on clothing all the time. But if I were raised today, I believe that I would truly still be questioning my sexuality because of how conflated society has the way that you present yourself, or the way that how masculine you are as a woman, or how feminine you are as a man. Somehow that has to do with what your sexual preference should be, and somehow that has to do with what your gender identity should be as well nowadays.
Well, why do you think you didn't question it then?
I think I've had times where I questioned it, especially when you questioned me. I'm like, well, damn, if my mom is asking me, but I just knew who, for me,
I'm not asking you, but
I do. I think it was right in this room. I was right in this room. I think you asked me because I was hanging out with certain people.
Yes.
Yeah. But, and then again, you were basing it on who I was hanging out with, not me. But for me, I just always knew who I was. That's what it is for me. I knew.
Well, what would have made it different? Because you said if that was today,
I would question. I think more people, like more of my peers, would question who I was.
So
like I was who I was, but you were the only person who questioned, T, are you gay? My peers didn't question that. You know what I mean? But we would talk about our crushes, and I guess I never brought up a girl, so maybe they didn't think to ask. But I've never had that question back then. And I feel like nowadays in this society, like that's a question that Journey might get just off rip. She might not even present, as a tomboy or whatever it may be. But that might be a question just because everyone thinks it's exactly. It might be a question because everyone thinks it's a topic of conversation now. When in my perspective, that's not a topic of conversation. That's a private thing for that person. Even back in the day, crushes used to be private. I had my crush and I would tell my best friends and, oh, I'm crushing on this guy and then ha ha ha. And you kept it quiet. Nowadays, you might post a picture on Instagram of who you crushing on so everyone could see it, or you on the one of those anonymous sites where you may not know about them, but they have like anonymous sites where you can post certain things or say certain things to certain people. But
and nobody knows it's you.
No one knows it's you, but people know it's you because you're
that?
telling everyone. Yes, or you're screenshotting it and putting it somewhere. It's like it used to be one called Keek, I think KIK.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, but I mean, even I'm out of step with a lot of the things that young people have now. Yeah, I'm getting up there gladly because it's a lot. I saw a list the other day. It said sites that parents should know about from a police department, and I was like, "What are these?" I'm used to MySpace and Facebook.
Yeah, well, yeah. If it was 10 years ago, you would know all of them.
Yeah, I probably would have. Dira probably knows more than me. She's a little younger.
No,
but
not.
I just think the way that society speaks about identity and sexuality nowadays makes it more of a public topic of conversation and a topic that should be kind of determined by how you present yourself or determined by what people think of you, rather determined by who you are. And there's kind of in society, there's a clear lack of knowing who you are, just in all realms. There's no encouragement to know who you are. There's a whole bunch. I mean, look at Kyrie. He watched a documentary to try to figure out who he is, gets in trouble for it, just on that level. But there is no type of encouragement or positive force that I can point to in popular culture that encourages people to take time to journal, meditate, pray. Prayer is a good thing. Like, communicate with yourself, talk to yourself.
Well, meditation and mindfulness and stuff are becoming a little more, the thing to do. So, I mean, that it connects us to that if that's how you go into your meditation, of course. If you're meditating on,
just breathing,
the secret and how to attract money, then it's, that's not the portal. But I had a point I wanted to say, and I've forgotten it.
Didn't you have questions? I didn't have a lot of questions. There were just a lot of points I wanted to discuss.
For those who may identify with what we're saying, and maybe, I think it's an everyday struggle to kind of keep a balance with yourself and the rest of what society encourages. I have a question written here. How do we balance our drives, our identity, and how do we continue forward or continue our journey in life? I think you gave a great example of a journey that perhaps many of us have not been on yet, about kind of realizing that blackness isn't necessarily what you identify with primarily anymore.
Well, it is still, yes, that was the point that I'm going, but no, it is still a primary identity because I'm still in this society that is pathological when it comes to blackness. But I'm moving into a recognition of myself as, if I was in a full black world, it wouldn't be blackness, right? I just happen to be black. But because I'm black in this pathological white supremacist society, that has become the thing that I identify with. But to your point, yes, I think I'm beginning to step into a space of recognizing just my spiritness beyond blackness, the you know, I don't know, quantifiable, unqualifiable, that just the essence of who I am, that goes beyond the shell that I exist in. And so your question was,
how do we balance to be able to get to a place where we can be more spirit beings? I'll change the question.
how to get to be, I mean, that's a good question. I think it has to start with the idea, the entertainment of the idea, right? So maybe there's some people out there that will never get it. But until you can actually entertain the idea of being a spirit being, you wouldn't be able to identify that word, right? Make the same as, in that sense, you won't be able to identify with being a spirit being.
I hear you saying a spiritual journey. Exploring it. Exploring yourself spiritually. It actually reminds me of something else I read in the study guide. I think I actually wrote it down. Okay. So I wrote this down at the end of the study guide. With everything I read in the analysis, I came to the conclusion from this that balance is restored by restoring or compensating for a missing component in life. Allah, God, is the source of this restoration. And I asked myself the question, what may I be missing in life that is causing an imbalance? And for me, in this conversation especially, I think that's key. I think that when we identify with something that is, I honestly got a new understanding in it. I've through this conversation, I think I've accepted that some people do identify with their sexuality. I'm not in the space where I identify with my sexuality, and perhaps I've been in that space, but I don't believe I've been in the space where I've ever identified with my sexuality just because of my upbringing, the bit that we talked about. However, I can understand that some people do. And, in my perspective, that's an imbalance. And I think that we are all imbalanced in some parts of our life. And I would say, in order to balance out where we may be on our journey, is kind of what you said. We have to keep moving towards fulfillment. And what fulfillment is, in my perspective, is completing your purpose. And your purpose is to use your gifts, your talents, and your skills to make this world a better place than when you came. And through that, I, of course, think the source of allowing you to do that is God. And searching for God, who he may be, who you believe he is, who you don't believe he is. I think your search for God will help to bring and restore balance in your life. So I can kind of bow to the fact that some people identify with their sexuality, and I believe that's the journey. I believe that's part of the journey.
That's an interesting conclusion. That maybe there are other phases that come after that.
And before that.
You're making me think about a young sister who committed suicide, who was homosexual, and it seemed like, I don't know the full story, but it seemed like that was had a lot to do with her dissatisfaction at that stage in her life when she killed herself, and but exploring spirituality and wanting to connect, but feeling the, you know, the conflict was like, but I'm gay, like, so that's not okay. Again, I don't know the full scope of everything, but you made me think about her, because I'm wondering, had she allowed herself to live in the direction that she was going, could she have gone to other phases that allowed her to transcend this idea that she was her sexuality?
That's touching. I think that's the importance, like we were talking about before, for everyone to be able to be. Like that's the importance of the space and the opportunity for everyone to just be who they are. It doesn't matter, you know, whether or not I like who they are or believe in who they are, but allow, when that person is around you, let them be. Because you don't know the demon somebody is struggling with that could lead, unfortunately, to a suicide. And we just had, I mean, I don't know the Black Man Twitch. I didn't really know of him, that celebrity who just committed suicide, but we truly have no idea the demons that someone can be facing. And when they're not able to ever have a safe space to just be, they're gonna, at times, that option could be to just leave. Yeah. I'm definitely a strong proponent of just letting everyone be. You don't have to agree to respect someone's space to be themselves. And that's in all aspects. Whether that person is, you know, sexually promiscuous, sex workers like people talk about today, let that person be. Because we all have a journey. We can't change someone.
Isn't that kind of where we are now, though? What we're doing, just kind of letting it be?
I don't think so. I think there's
opposition.
I don't think we're in the space. I think some of us can be in the space where we let it be. Let people be. But I think we're in the space. I think there always also has to be that privacy that I talked about before. Because I think we're in a space, too, where if we're, let's say, the LGBTQ community, we let them be, we're not letting cisgendered, straight people be. You know? It's kind of like always a this or that. There's kind of like other or not. They or us. And it's kind of like a boundary instead of just allowing everyone to be. Which is
a more African-centered way of being.
Yes.
That, you know, unity of opposites being perfectly understandable. Whereas in a white world, is this or that, and I just can't even reconcile the two together. It just makes no sense. So interesting.
Yeah. Just it makes me think of, in, you know, Twitter world or social media, the identity of a straight Black man is seen as the antithesis to everything except a white man. You know, a straight Black man is the epitome of toxic masculinity, or the number one threat to the LGBTQ community and the Black community.
Is that what's being said?
This, just the idea is portrayed in that way. That straight Black man, you know, the popular term is ends ain't S.
Is who what?
Niggas ain't.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the popular term.
Who says that?
Everyone. Everyone. Yeah, but I think that it's very Europeanized, but it's as if you don't identify as this, that means you're the enemy. If you're not Democrat, then that means I don't like you because you're Republican.
Mm.
You know, and that idea has become prevalent in society, and I think that while we're being taught by liberal society, I would say, to accept certain people, we're also being taught on the flip side to deny people who aren't that way, or that people who aren't that way shouldn't have a certain say in certain things. Or if you're Christian and you don't believe that living a homosexual lifestyle is correct, then you're all of a sudden an enemy to people who live a homosexual lifestyle.
Mm.
When that's not necessarily true. You can have your morals and live in peace with somebody who thinks other than you. And I think as just Black people in a society, we can understand that easily, although we still get wrapped up in that.
Mm-hmm.
But we have always been othered. We've always been the people who are being perpetrated against, always the people who have gotten the bottom of the barrel. So we understand that just because somebody is white, that doesn't mean that they're a horrible person. But their actions say it. But how they address you, if they can't respect you as a human being, that is what makes that person kind of evil or averse to humankind and, the respectability that we should all have as human beings.
I was just thinking about this idea of homosexuality being immoral on, based on God's standards, or being a sin based on God's standards. And I don't know if, I don't want to say, but anyway, that for those who view it in that way, what indication is there that homosexuality is a sin that's worse than lying, stealing, murder, right? Like, what makes that, if it is, what makes that any worse? And so we kind of function in society as though when religion is used to argue against people who are homosexual, it is as though that's a cardinal sin, unlike any other sin. Anyhow, yeah. That was just a thought that just came to me.
It's a good question.
But you going back here for a moment, you'd asked about the journey you were asking about, and how to restore balance. How did you see that?
I would say, thinking on my life, honestly, the thing that saved me through my life from a lot of bad turns, perhaps even, is just knowing myself. Always striving to know myself. I think it's in my personality. I'm an introvert.
What? Who? Okay.
I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert. I'm shy. I stayed in my room a lot of times when I was living here at home.
And all of those are identities. Identity is the literal sense of the word, to make the same as. Those are identities. But are those really...
No, I'm not saying that's the way.
Who you are.
I think they can be. They're not... I think those are things that I came through. I literally remember when I shed my shyness. I shed my shyness when I went to Rutgers.
So then that wasn't your true identity then? Because your identity is in nature in which you were made.
But
if you look at it in that way.
What I'm saying, in order to answer the question, is that I believe that those qualities that I had helped me to just be comfortable being with myself. I'm still definitely an introvert. That's for sure, just me. My energy comes from being with myself, by myself, waking up at 5 a.m, watching the sunrise, and meditating, journaling, or just sitting there with myself. That gives me energy. But I think that inclination that I had helped me to, throughout my life, know myself more and be more concerned about myself and my own thoughts rather than other people's perceptions of me, and rather than what I want to portray to other people. I was more concerned about me getting to know me. And then also having the knowledge of, honestly, the teachings, the Nation of Islam, as well as kind of a reference book. As light as it was back in the day, my understanding, I would say, was very light. But as light as it was, it helped me. I would know to go to the Quran, or I would know to go to Message to the Black Man, or go to a lecture by the minister if I really felt stuck. Because I wasn't the type to go talk to someone about what I was going through. I would go to a lecture. I would go to my journal to write about the lecture or write about what I was going through. So it was, for me, knowing myself is what got me through each and every journey that I've been through. And with my sexual experiences as well, that was really it. Just knowing myself and keeping it. For me, privacy was a protection. Big time. Privacy was a big time protection in me not, in college per se, wilding out and becoming pregnant perhaps. Or doing, just involving myself in the things I saw around me.
You from that, you're saying?
Yes. Being private, being introverted protected me from trying to use my sex, the tool of sex, trying to use it as a way to relate to others, which I saw all around me happening. So that, I would say, just knowing myself, staying to myself, and being myself in the best way that I could at each and every level of my life, no matter what I was going through in that journey, helped me to get to the state of balance I needed to then go into the next imbalance. Because I wouldn't say I'm in a state of balance right now. But, yeah, I think
many of us are.
That's
Once
the journey.
we get it, we're going to lose it anyway. We
Absolutely.
talked about balance. I think in another
Yes, we
podcast, didn't we?
we talked to, yeah, we did.
Analogy.
Yep. The bike.
Yep.
That was our healing circle.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I hope that this conversation has been interesting, thought-provoking, healing for some if need be. If you had any thoughts on it that you would like to share, please make sure, if you're on Spotify, to leave your thoughts. If you're on YouTube, leave your thoughts in the comment section. If you are on Apple, don't forget to leave a review for the podcast. And yeah, do you have any words, Ma, that you would like to share?
Oh boy, no, nothing. I think I said all that I can say, and I'm a little sleepy, so that might be evident throughout this podcast. So I hope I'll be forgiven. I'm still on jet lagged from a recent travel, so forgive me.
Well, thank you for being on here again, Ma. Love having you on the podcast.
It was fun.
Yes. I would like to close with, I respect everyone's form and ability to identify the way that they would like to. The purpose of this conversation
I have something I want to close with when you finish.
Okay, bet. In the purpose of this conversation is just me coming with my idea that I think there's an imbalance in taking on sexuality as identity, as yourself. because the self is so much more than who you have sex with or how and when you choose to have sex. And yes, I just hope that was made clear in the conversation. And yeah, go ahead, Mom.
Just some words from the Holy Quran and also the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. The Holy Quran says in chapter 30, verse 30, there is no altering Allah's creation. There is no altering Allah's creation. However Allah created you is who you. Now you might put a mask on, dress it up a certain way, use certain language, but the essence of who you are cannot be altered. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that everything that functions in accord with its nature has the power of God to do and be itself. It's already yours. The power to do and be, right? The full manifestation of whatever that is, however Allah created you, you have that when you're functioning within your nature. And so I just wanted those words to me speak volumes and are very powerful. So I wanted to share that.
Thank you for that. And I hope that each and every one that is listening enjoys the journey to their fulfillment, enjoys the journey to being able to live more in who they were created to be and what their nature is. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for listening to this podcast episode. I will see you. Peace.
Peace.